When are we starting? Has
About
it been
10 seconds
has it
ago.
been 10 minutes yet?
10 seconds ago,
You
David.
said to wait 10 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hoops HD. This is the Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by the puppet over there that has no idea what time it is, John Titel. Little three-man weave tonight, I think, correct? Just three of us, a little smaller
It
show than
is.
normal.
There's no games tonight, which meant everybody decided to go do something fun rather than the podcast.
So what does that say about the three of us? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. We were watching Moorhead and Marshall, and there were some games tonight, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a very late schedule with finals this week, but there was a lot of action over the past week, especially this past weekend, and a lot we want to get to. So let's just jump right on into it, in fact, and let me pull up the hopefully I don't mess this up like I did in the Under the Radar show we did last week. But
yeah, we got a good picture of the San Antonio.
Do we have San Antonio or do we have standings?
It's still a blank screen. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
No, we got standings. We got SEC standings.
SEC standings. That's where we want to start things off today, in the SEC. And Titel, let me start things off with you and what we saw yesterday on Sunday, that Tennessee-Gonzaga game.
Huge win for the Volunteers. Rick Barnes gets the monkey off his proverbial back, having finally gotten a win over a top-ranked team. Tennessee is legit. They were a top great team last year, protected seed, the whole 9 yards. They come back this year. They only have one loss. It happens to be in overtime to a pretty darn good Kansas team. I'm not sure if they're a home court hero just yet. Obviously, the win against Gonzaga in Phoenix for unknown reasons is a great, great win. They travel to Memphis on Saturday for their first true road game. It's already mid-December. Then they have 4 home games in a row. So one of their first 13 overall games is going to be a road game. I don't know that we can start believing in them to go very, very far. This great program, great tradition of guys like Bernard King and Ernie Grunfeld and everybody, they've made one Elite Eight in the history of the program.
Well, I'll tell you, after the way on opening day Duke looks against Kentucky, and the way out of Maui that Gonzaga looked against Duke, and then Tennessee to get this win over the Zags, especially, and the Zags played great. I think one of the most incredible blocks I've ever seen from Brandon Clark in this game.
Yeah, the Brandon Clark block, and if you missed it, it was a guy going up for a two-handed slam. He just blocked it, not fouled him. A clean block, one of the most impressive singular defensive plays I have ever seen in any level of basketball. It was full of, maybe not plays like that, but it was full of big plays and great shots and just such a high-level game. You don't see many games that are that high level throughout the year, maybe deep into the tournament. You see some, but it was such a high-level game, such a well-played game on both ends. And let me ask you both this. When was the last time you saw a team play that well and not win a game? Because Gonzaga played a great game. I mean, that just goes to show you how great that game was.
I don't know that I've seen it. Maybe different. I don't think I've seen it this year. I don't think I've seen it since probably since last year's tournament.
Either that or the one that comes to my mind was the Kansas-Oklahoma quadruple overtime game.
I think we've seen better because since then. But I'm talking
yeah.
This was 2 teams that looked like they were playing in March and not still in early December though.
Right. And I get what Titel's saying about their true road games. I mean, obviously that is something that I highly value, and Memphis has a little bit of momentum going, and they're going to be jacked to be hosting such a highly ranked team at home. But when you look at what Tennessee's done, they beat Louisville. They took Kansas to overtime in a game where they had a lead throughout the second half. They trailed Gonzaga and came back and got the lead. I mean, so they've lost one game, and it was to Kansas, who's a 1 seed or a likely 1 seed, and they have a win over of Gonzaga. I believe in them, and I know that they don't have much of a history, only one Elite Eight. It was actually fairly recent when Bruce Pearl was there. But this is a really, really good Tennessee team. And how about, I guess, did you see they had a big crowd on hand to welcome them back when the bus arrived back on campus after the landing at the airport. This is, I mean, I don't ever remember Tennessee as a fan base being this jacked about basketball. They love their basketball, but this is something that I've not really seen out of their fans before.
Well,
welcoming a team back in December.
I got to say, between what Tennessee did this week, Auburn picking up a couple wins, win Dayton, okay, not great.
Yeah.
Mississippi State with a nice win over Clemson this week. And David, Kentucky then goes and plays what we thought was a pretty weak Seton Hall team, and once again lays another egg, as they've seem to be doing all season.
Yeah, and let's pull up that profile if we can.
For Kentucky?
Kentucky, using some of this notebook or workbook technology of yours, because you're going to see that it's pretty empty. John Teitel, our selection committee guessing expert, what do you make of that right now?
So there is very little quality up top. They have been taking care of business against the bottom, which is what you're supposed to do. And if Seton Hall keeps playing like that, it's going to turn out to be a Tier 1 loss rather than its current Tier 2 loss, as you can see on the left side of the screen. The Duke loss was horrific, but it was very early on, obviously, opening night, and it was something that people aren't going to forget about because of the shocking nature of it and the national TV and the Zion coming out party and everything. But it's certainly a good loss, and obviously they're going to have plenty of chances in the not only conference play, but you'll see we got North Carolina and Louisville coming up in back-to-back weeks. So plenty of chances for them to impress or to keep on being mediocre.
Yeah, Teitel, I mean, when you look at this profile, though, I mean, you look not only what the loss to Seton Hall after they made the miracle half-court shot at the end of regulation to tie it, just an amazing shot, but then they do lose in overtime. They didn't play that great against teams like VMI, who they only beat by 10, and it was closer than that. And now you look at this next stretch here: Utah home, North Carolina neutral, at Louisville. They've also got a non-conference game against Kansas coming up in January. I don't know that this team can win the way they're playing right now, any of these games, can they?
Yeah, and let me make the same point that Teitel just made about Tennessee. 7-2 on the year, all 7 wins coming at home. No true road wins yet. No true road games yet. The first being Louisville. So are you equally concerned about whether Kentucky can win away from home? Because so far they haven't. Now, I know Seton Hall was mostly a road game, but it wasn't on their campus. It was at MSG.
It's a valid concern. The one thing I do like in Kentucky's favor, if you see the schedule, the spacing, it's not like they have these like 2 games in 3 days kind of thing. It's like a full 7-day break in between every single game. So I don't think they're going to sweep like the next 4 in a row or anything, because God knows Alabama's a great team, as we learned on Sunday. But I think they'll have enough time to play hard, recover.
I guess maybe that's one of the 2 other teams we should briefly mention here in the SEC. Alabama with the nice win over, with the nice or not so nice win over Arizona on Sunday, and also Arkansas with a team that we started to like with the home loss to Western Kentucky on Saturday.
Yeah, a home loss where they appear to have everything in control, and you couple that with a Western Kentucky team that seemed to be spiraling out of control. I don't know what switch flipped for both teams, but that was an amazing comeback, and it kind of makes you sit up and look at Western Kentucky. We'll get to them on Under the Radar here later in the week, but I still kind of like this Arkansas team. I mean, everyone's going to have a few whiffs, and I'm kind of, other than that, their only loss was in overtime to Texas. Are we pulling up? We're pulling up.
I'll pull up Arkansas also. Okay. I'll pull up Arkansas on the left here. I also want to briefly ask. I'll get a side tell about Florida, but David, more points about Arkansas. There you go.
Well, the win at Colorado State, not all that impressive, but I don't know. I still think Arkansas has it in them to get inside the bubble.
Teitel, Florida has a very interesting week with a win at the Jimmy V Classic over West Virginia that turns around with a loss to Michigan State and a close loss at that.
Yes, so this is the left side of the screen is much like Kentucky's profile, as we saw, not a lot of Tier 1 upper left quadrant wins. Unlike Kentucky, instead of a Seton Hall thing hanging out in Tier 2, this is all top 45-ish Tier 1 losses, and a lot of them, as you can see, 7 points, 5 points, 4 points. They've been competitive, and they're not all at home. They're all over the country. So I think Florida's profile is looking okay. Obviously, you need to win some games. A couple of cupcakes coming up, and then a big game against Butler before they enter SEC play. And a quick note back to the left side with Arkansas. The 2 losses are by a combined 3 points. They're literally like 2 possessions away from being undefeated. So certainly should not give up on Arkansas just yet.
And Arkansas, very easy remaining rest of the non-conference schedule there as well, other than the Texas Tech game in January.
I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see that Texas State game. Texas State only one loss, but very untested. I don't think they're going to step up on Arkansas, but that's their chance. Again, we'll get to that on Wednesday.
Yeah. Got the upcoming schedule here. As we mentioned, it is a light week, and the most noteworthy game. Well, I guess there is a somewhat interesting game coming up here Wednesday night. LSU at an undefeated Houston team. This might be Houston's biggest test so far.
I absolutely think it is, even though they're at home, and it's a nice test for LSU as well, who is good, but again, their profile currently, and again, we're just midway through the first, like we're to the first under 12 timeout in the first half of the season. So lots to go, but LSU doesn't have really any big meat on their resume either. So this is a chance for them. Auburn, UAB.
I was going to say the other game I'm really looking forward to here Saturday is the Cincinnati Mississippi State game.
Yeah,
I think there's a chance to be a real good one between a Mississippi State team that I think is playing excellent basketball and not getting as much love in the polls as Tennessee and Auburn are.
Right. They are playing really well. And Cincinnati, we'll get to them here in a little bit. They had at least a feel-good win over the weekend and have some momentum built up. So, but this is going to be a much tougher test.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go a little bit out of order here because we spoke a little bit about Gonzaga already with the loss to Tennessee. Let's take a little closer look at their conference because heading into the week, they were our number 1 team in the nation. Now they dropped to number 4, 6 in the coaches poll with that loss. David, you think they should drop that low based on one loss to a very good Tennessee team?
In my opinion, no. Shockingly, I don't vote in the coaches poll. Has something to do with not being a coach. Can't quite figure that one out. How can you draw? But you just kind of want to watch. And I know how the polls work. It's ballooning. The most important factor is when your most recent loss was. And their most recent loss was over the weekend. The fact that it was to a really, really good Tennessee team doesn't really matter. They just sank below seemingly everybody who had lost not as recent.
But when we look at the West Coast Conference, Titel, maybe there's a couple of teams we need to be discussing. Look at some of these net ratings where you've got 4 teams in the top 53, 55, including the San Francisco team there, 21 in the net still.
I don't know if we have to be discussing San Francisco, but I'm going to because they're a great team. They've got one loss. It's by 4 points to an undefeated Buffalo team. It didn't even occur in America. It was over in Belfast, Northern Ireland. This team starts 3 seniors. It's not like a bunch of a coach having to bring the freshmen along quickly. He can rely on his veterans. They have winnable games coming up this month at home. Stanford, who Pac-12 is very poor this year. St. Mary's, who is very underwhelming this year. If they win both those games, as well as all the others that are cupcakes, they could be 15-1 when hosting the Zags on January 12th. Ironically, the Zags, who were literally number 1 in the country a week ago, could be having a worse record at that point. If they lose at Carolina this Saturday, the Zags could be 15-2 against a 15-1 San Francisco team. You thought Gonzaga and St. Mary's was the only West Coast big rivalry. I got news for you. The Dons are here to play.
Yeah. And I know another team, can we talk about LMU a little bit, also with one loss? I realize that most of it has come against a pastry cart, but they did get a nice win against Georgetown. They went to UCLA, really kind of disappointing, not just that they lost, but that they didn't compete more than they did, but still their only loss and a much improved team there. They had been horrific in recent years, but really off to at least a good start right now.
And they play such an exciting type of basketball with that 349 the nation tempo. Really,
yes. I mean, if you like to go fast, I mean, they are going 349 miles an hour.
I also just want to give a quick shout out with this conference to BYU. A heck of a week for BYU, beating not only winning the Holy War on Saturday over Utah, dominating fashion, but also earlier in the week beating Utah State, who had been playing really well. So. Great week for BYU. Maybe they can, now that they're getting healthier, get things going well also.
And that is a noticeable difference. And both those, like Utah State was on campus. Utah was neutral site at the NBA arena. They split the tickets. I did not realize that was happening until I turned on the game, and there it was. So very cool atmosphere. I mean, there was a bunch of other things going on, but what did you all think of that? It was sort of like the NCAA tournament of old before all the suits and corporate sponsors showed up. You had a divided arena going at it. What an atmosphere that was. Of course, it wasn't much of a game.
I think the problem was it wasn't much of a game, and quite honestly, I wasn't watching much of it when I found out it wasn't much of a game. So,
Yeah. So.
Coming up this week, other game I'm going to kind of circle here is this game Wednesday night, the San Diego at Oregon game. I think Oregon needs to be on upset alert, the way they've been playing and the way San Diego's been playing so far this year.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Let's stick out West Titel and let's talk about what did happen with what happened with two teams in the state of Arizona here, and you want to talk about first of all what happened to your Wildcats on Sunday?
I don't, but we must. So they go out to Alabama. For some reason, this is a team living on the East Coast as a Wildcat fan. A plus is that they finally play like in games that don't start at 11:30 Eastern time. So I love that part of it. And the fact that they've come twice in back-to-back weekends with UConn and then Alabama, I don't think they've ever crossed the Mississippi twice before. So it's very new territory. That being said, when they fell behind 19 points in the first half to the Tide, I'm like, there must be something else to watch on the tube. Then I flip back and we're tied in the second half, and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to do it. And then they don't. Alabama, I don't know what the refs are like down there. All I'm saying is that the Tide shot 28 free throws and Arizona shot 9. Seems like quite a big discrepancy to me.
That's what happens when you come into SEC country. Come on. Yeah. But David, besides Arizona, we talked a little Gonzaga already, but what about the other game Gonzaga played this week? That great game against Washington, a great exciting finish, but Zags did pull that one out.
Yeah, it was really, really exciting. Way more than what I was expecting. I know that's a sort of a rivalry. The teams don't really get along, or at least the fans and coaches don't. For them to and Gonzaga got out of the gate early. I think they were up 13 or 15 really early on, and it looked like they were going to run away from it. But Washington, to their credit, stayed in there. Twice they overcame double-digit deficits to either get the lead or tie the game, and it took a last-second shot for Gonzaga to win it. Or a shot in the final seconds. I think Washington did have a chance to tie it. Or was it with less than a second to go?
Yeah, it was. They had a shot there at the end. But,
yeah.
I mean, all in all, if you look at this, just a horrible, horrible week for the Pac-12. When the only win of note was UCLA's very close win over what I think is a pretty weak Notre Dame team.
Correct.
USC got demolished by TCU, and Arizona State, they had a shot against Nevada, we thought, but that game kind of went the sour, too.
Finally, some good news for me. The Devils were in it. They were up 15 in the first half, and I thought that they were for real. And then the second half happened, and they were not for real because the Wolfpack, despite the fact Wolfpack only made 3 threes the whole game. I thought that was one way to beat a team is when they shoot ice cold. But they just kind of couldn't get it together. Nevada's got a very senior-laden team for Coach Musselman, and he got the best of Hurley. And I was certainly not crying any tears. When we get to the Mountain West, I'll have many more thoughts on Nevada, but not a great week for the state of Arizona.
This would be sort of an oddity with getting no one past the round of 64 last year. Titel, our selection committee guessing expert, do you see a protected seat in this conference?
I don't know if we're going to get anybody into the field of 64 this year. That's pathetic. Colorado 7-1 might be the best team in the conference. God help us.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we have to start talking Colorado at some point here? Because that's the only team with that.
Loves them. I wish Joey was on here to explain why. Because when you look at their profile, there is absolutely nothing impressive on it. But
yeah, you take it. The only thing, even Oregon State, who we thought may be the sleeper team, they go lose to St. Louis, and you don't lose to A-10 teams this year, I guess, unless you're a Pac-12 team.
Right. One high note here, Chad. Wazoo beat their big rival Idaho, and a strange fact about those two strange facts. Those schools are 8 miles apart. They are 7.4 according to MapQuest, and they have never met in the NCAA tournament. I think that's the only rivalry where that applies.
It might be. I got to congratulate them for following up that big win with a loss to Montana State.
Yes, Montana. Montana State's second win of the year, I believe.
Upcoming schedule there, you can see the games. We already mentioned the San Diego-Oregon game. I guess a couple of interesting games coming up on the weekend, including maybe the Washington-Virginia Tech game being played right in my backyard here in Atlantic City. That might be – I mean, Washington really needs this win if they want to start turning things around this season.
Yeah, Arizona State goes to Vanderbilt. Would have been much more interesting if Vandy was at full strength. Colorado going to New Mexico would have been much more interesting if New Mexico wasn't awful.
Yeah. Let's move over to another conference.
Yeah,
Please.
How about let's talk about the number one team in the nation now. They started the season number 2, got passed by Duke despite not having lost a game. Then they got passed by Gonzaga despite not having lost a game. Finally made number 1 in the nation today, though. Congrats to the Kansas Jayhawks, who, although they didn't look great the entire game, had a huge final score margin win over Wofford, and followed that up with a tough, hard-fought win over a pretty good New Mexico State team. And David, I think that was more of a sign that this is a solid New Mexico State team than that Kansas really struggled too much in that game.
Me too, and we will talk a lot about that on Wednesday. There was some brushback, and I was flipping through Twitter, and how is it Kansas is number 1? They barely beat New Mexico State. Well, they beat Tennessee, who is – we have covered that already. They're really good. They've beaten everybody they've played, and New Mexico State is good. Now, ordinarily, would you expect the number 1 team to win more comfortably at home against a top 40 team, which we think New Mexico State is? Yes, but I think that what I took away from that game is credit to New Mexico State, not discredit to Kansas. But yeah, number 1 in the nation, and how could they not be? Like, if you're not voting for them, who are you voting for?
Well, I'll tell you, there's one other team that's getting no love from the polls or any media attention, but very quietly only one loss. Yeah. Hightower. What about the Sooners?
They are boomering it up. You thought that the Heisman Trophy was going to be the biggest thing to go to Norman this weekend, but the Sooners are for real. You have to keep in mind where they were and where they're at. They had Trae Young. He became a lottery pick after leaving after 1 year. So you lose the best player, one of the best players in the country, from a 14-loss team. But as you said, they've only got 1 loss, and it was in the Bahamas to a very good Wisconsin team. They got tons of quality wins. We got Wofford, we got Florida, Dayton, Notre Dame, Wichita State. Bunch of not like top 10 teams, but top 100 teams. I assume they're going to destroy USC this weekend because I think the 3 of us plus a couple guys on the street.
Yeah.
Then it gets very interesting. You thought their schedule was tough already. After USC, they have 21 games left. Each of those 21 games are against not just top 100 teams, but top 70 teams. So it's a sign that the Big 12 is great, but also a sign that it's great to do things in November and December. It's a whole nother ball game the rest of the season.
Yeah, maybe their only nights off may be the Baylor games, but some metrics have Baylor a lot higher than the net metric even right now. And David, a couple other teams we got to discuss in the Big 12. Talk about an egg being laid. What happened with K-State on Saturday?
K-State has beaten – they've won home bye games, and they've won home bye games. I'm beginning to wonder maybe they just haven't kind of kicked it in the gear yet, but, yeah, losing on the road to Tulsa. If you can't win at Tulsa, who the hell in this conference are you going to beat away from home?
Tulsa with a great week against the conference, having beaten Oklahoma State on Wednesday and followed it up with the K-State win. They're in first place.
Yeah, if Ron Hunter were coaching this team, he'd declare his team to be in first place, although both of Ron Hunter's wins over the SEC team on the road. But real disappointed in Kansas State. And they just didn't even look that good. Not to take anything away from Tulsa, but just a really poor performance there.
So I guess the one team that did have a good week, though, was TCU. Very nice road win at SMU. Always tough to win on the road, as we know, and then followed it up with what they just demolished, as we mentioned, USC. Right. I still think USC doesn't know what hit them in that game.
Right. TCU kind of stumbled out of the gate, but I think they've really kicked it in the gear. They've got a lot of momentum going. And, again, kind of quiet. If you can call being ranked 11th quiet, not a whole lot of chatter or fodder about Texas Tech, who is, again, very, very good.
Yeah, it was Texas Tech only played Pine Bluff this week, so really didn't get any attention. But Tytel, let me go over here to you. The upcoming schedule, and we've had a lot of very good games so far this year. Do we have another one coming Saturday, or is it a blowout with this Villanova-Kansas game?
I was going to say Abilene Christian's pretty good, but no, the Villanova-Kansas game is going to be fantastic.
Okay.
We throw around the term Hall of Fame a lot, at least I do. Villanova and Kansas is Hall of Fame coach and Jay Wright against Hall of Fame coach and Bill Self. The huge X factor is 7 feet tall and is not playing. Udoka Azubuike out with a sprained right ankle. The best part about that for the Jayhawks is that, as you might have seen or read about, Villanova is not great this year, and they don't have like a 7-foot guy like Omari Spellman or other centers they've had in the past down low. Still a 3-point shooting team. So if there's one great team that you have to try to survive against without your 7-footer, it's a team like Villanova.
A couple other games to look at too, David. Georgia State, who already has a few scalps, at Kansas State, who we just discussed.
Yeah, K-State, I know that they're at home in the Octagon of Doom, and they're more of a home court hero than anything, but they better watch out. This is a pretty good Georgia State team.
And the other team, though, that's got an interesting game on Saturday that we just discussed them a little bit. We didn't discuss them. We probably should have. Is the Longhorns, who bounced back from, I believe it was 3 straight losses, at least 2 straight losses to VCU and to Radford at home to get a nice win over Purdue the other day. But now they've got the Grand Canyon Antelopes coming into town.
Yeah, Grand Canyon. Lots of good effort on their part this year. Really had UCLA on the ropes, should have beaten them, and really played very well against Nevada in that game on Saturday. What a ticket that was! If you had the Gonzaga, Tennessee, and then Grand Canyon, Nevada game. So
yeah, but the Longhorns, hopefully that Purdue win can get things rolling there, because they were really in danger at one point in that game of losing 3 straight home games, which I don't know how.
Right.
Can you lose 3 straight home games in non-conference play, Tytel, and still make the tournament?
I mean, Purdue is a good team. Like, I can explain it away. The good thing is we learned how to defend the Boilermakers is let Carson Edwards do whatever he wants. He scored 40, and they still lost. So just guard everybody else.
Let's turn to the ACC now. And this is the conference that, again, you're looking at all kinds of great metrics here, as we always see in this conference. And Dave, where do you want to start with this? Do you want to start with Virginia, who's now, or sorry, Duke, who's number 2 in the nation, Virginia, who's undefeated?
Either one. Well, let's kind of start off. Well, let's start off with Virginia.
Okay.
The home game against VCU was kind of hard fought. They were down for most of that game. In fact, they didn't really get control of it until after the under 4 timeout. But getting to 9-0 with some pretty decent, although nothing earth-shattering on their profile yet, but a lot of decent wins. I think that again, they were my pick to win the ACC. I think that the way they ended the season last year kind of soured a lot of people on them, but here they are once again, that strong. And, of course, Duke is just athletic upon athletic upon athletic. So,
Tytel, let me ask you about another team here. On Saturday, we saw Louisville go into Indiana and give what I think is a pretty good Hoosiers team a heck of a game. Do you think this Louisville team sounds like a tournament team at this point?
I want to say so only because they've lost to one great team in Tennessee and 2 good teams, Marquette and Indiana, by a combined 4 points. So, like, the resume looks good in terms of the quadrants and the tiers and everything. And the Michigan State win in overtime at home even is fantastic. Seton Hall win is looking much, much better. And they have a few cupcakes before worrying about Kentucky in a couple of weeks. That being said, I'm not a believer in this team just yet. You know that I hate teams with first-year coaches, although Chris Mack is far from a rookie coach. He got a lot of experience in the great state of Ohio. And they have a very athletic team, not a ton of senior leadership. And you know I love senior leadership. So I'm not sold on them just yet as a tournament team.
And David, sorry, you want to talk about them first, and then I got a question.
Yeah, I kind of am. Well, maybe not. I don't see like when you look at their merit, they have the home win against Michigan State, and as you said, none of their losses are particularly bad. They also have a nice win at Seton Hall, like not in MSG, but on Seton Hall's campus. So, I mean, do you think Seton Hall's a tournament team? Do you think Michigan State's a tournament team? I kind of think that they are. And the one thing about Louisville is that they seem to be getting better incrementally as the year goes along. I know they're coming off a loss to Indiana, but Indiana's going to win a lot of games at home this year.
Yeah. And Dave, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is we saw an old Big East rivalry. The Syracuse-Georgetown game that was a lot closer of a game than I thought it would be. And this Syracuse team, after beating Ohio State, now, really struggled with Georgetown.
Where to begin? It was absolutely fantastic. It was rammed full. It was loud. It was intense. It felt like the old Syracuse-Georgetown rivalry when they were both in the Big East. I think Georgetown went up early. Syracuse kind of had to come back. It came down to the wire. Last year, it went into overtime. How fantastic is it that they have kept this going? And not only have they kept it going, but it still sort of feels, even if it doesn't mean nearly as much on paper, it's still a big game in the sense that it's a big win on the resume. And it still feels like a rivalry, a big rivalry. It was great.
That was a fun game. I guess there's one other team we really want to discuss, Titel, because you having some Penn Quaker ties there, huh? How about those Miami Hurricanes and what they have not been doing this season?
Quick Syracuse note to finish up on them.
Oh, sorry.
This is a team with an ACC schedule. The third highest ranked team on their entire schedule right now is Buffalo. God bless. Good luck. They're going to need it. Miami. This is not a bad team. This is a team that was a 6th seed last March. They come out this year. They've had injuries. They've had suspensions, ineligible players. So Jim Larinaga is dealing with a lot. What he's also dealing with is 2 straight losses to Ivy League teams, back-to-back, Yale and Penn, 4 losses in a row. To give you an idea of how long it's been since they last lost 4 in a row, it was January 2011. To give you an idea of how long ago that was, the coaches in that game were Frank Haith and Seth Greenberg, and they have no bench. At the 200 minutes that they used on the court against Penn, they had 6 guys play 191 of those 200 minutes. They are hurting. I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon unless Juan Hernandez is declared eligible like tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the good news I guess they have is the rest of the month is a bunch of cupcakes, but that's
right.
The only good news they have there.
Yeah, I think Miami's biggest problem right now is that they're losing to bad teams.
Hey.
Oh, that was a low blow. That was a low blow.
Yeah.
After they lose to Rutgers and to Penn, you hit the two of us with that. Upcoming schedule in the ACC. Among other games, you do see that Notre Dame-Purdue game coming up on Saturday. Gonzaga, North Carolina, we already discussed. And Lipscomb, Louisville.
Yeah, Lipscomb, Louisville. I'm excited about this one. If you're watching this and you don't watch Under the Radar, you probably don't know how good Lipscomb is. They're not as good as Louisville. I'm not going to go predict an upset or anything crazy, but they're a lot better than just about any bye game that you'll see Louisville play.
Well, I'll tell you what, their game on Saturday also against Kent State, not a team they want to overlook, and Clemson. Right. Don't overlook Radford on Saturday either.
Clemson's been very disappointing if you want to talk about teams that are underachieving this year. Clemson is just dog poo. And Pittsburgh, after we sang their praises after like almost beating Iowa, they've lost 3 in a row since starting off 6-0.
Well, let's go over to how about the Big Ten? We haven't discussed that yet. Titel, let me bring it in here where we do have Michigan still undefeated here at the top of the standings, also 2-0 in conference, including that early conference action. Picked up a win over South Carolina as well. Your thoughts on them and the rest of the top of the Big Ten?
Michigan, I guess I could have them number 1 in the net ranking because they've had a very difficult schedule. If you beat Villanova at Villanova, obviously, like that's something that very few teams do. I saw the game against Northwestern. It was a road win against a top 50 team. It was barely a win at all. I thought the Wildcats were going to pull that one out. As for the rest of the top of the Big Ten, I mean, like it's early, obviously, although it has conference play has started, which I hate. I want to talk about Indiana real quick because they come out. This is a mediocre team last year, 16-15. Right now, they have 2 losses: Duke on the road and a 1-point loss at Arkansas, who's not too bad. They've been winning good games against good teams, but by small margins. They
Yes.
Northwestern, Penn State, and Louisville back to back to back by 1 or 2 points. So they're hanging on by their chinny chin chin because they don't have the senior league. They have Juwan Morgan, but they got youngsters like Romeo Langford, the McDonald's All-American, 2 freshman starters and 2 sophomore starters. So the other Coach Miller has his hands full. Huge game against Butler in Indianapolis this Saturday when we get to that page.
Yeah. David, I guess I'll give you 3 seconds here. Nebraska, actually a very nice non-conference win over Creighton that they really needed on Saturday.
Yes, and they now own that series. They own that state. It's just been phenomenal. Nebraska 8-0 on the season because because of the dark white conspiracy, I think you should only look at games that they play in the state of Nebraska. And I thought I hadn't finished my thought yet.
David, Titel, now let me go over to you here. You mentioned here's the upcoming schedule. I think that's the Crossroads Classic doubleheader there on Saturday. Indiana, Butler, Purdue, Notre Dame. We've also got Iowa, Northern Iowa. Lots of some interesting games. I guess Rutgers at Seton Hall.
I think that is the game that you should talk about. Do you think the Scarlet Knights have a prayer?
Well, they had a little bit of trouble in Fordham, but not everybody can go into Fordham and win. I mean, I don't think Columbia won there this year, and no. But Rutgers' problem is that they're really good at playing about 30 minutes of basketball. Hopefully by next year we'll be able to play 40 minutes.
Yeah. How about Ohio? Well, yeah, Ohio State still going strong. Michigan State looking like a protected seed. Whiskey, I think they're better this year than they were a year ago.
Yeah, I think they're a lot better. But let's take a look at quick look at the Big East statue, David, and let's pull up the standings here, where we've got the number 7 on the screen. Let's try to fix that.
Yeah, we've got a 7 on the screen. There's a 7 on the screen. Oh boy.
There we go. Let's talk about the undefeated team.
He would be at us all the time.
I believe this is the only undefeated team in the nation now that is not ranked in either of the polls. I think Houston broke into one of the polls today.
Oh, they did.
What about the St. John's Red Storm there at an impressive 9-0? And I think we should pull up the team sheet, David.
Yeah, we should. The 9-0 is impressive. I don't know how much of the rest of this team sheet is. I'm anxious to hear what Titel thinks of it, but neutral floor wins against VCU, Georgia Tech. The win at Rutgers, actually, even though Rutgers lost at Fordham, Rutgers has been pretty tough at home. Is that their only home loss? I think it is.
Yeah.
And but I guess like whenever I've watched this team, with the exception of VCU, where they had to come from way behind to win that game. They just haven't looked the part. A 4-point win against Bowling Green. That was one of the games. Sweating out Cal. And I haven't watched all their games, but I've watched both of those and the VCU game, and I've just wondered, how is it this team is undefeated, but they are?
They struggled against number 347 winless Mount St. Mary's this past week. Titel, you talked about teams that are 2 or 3 points away from being undefeated. This St. John's team is about 10 points away from being winless, aren't they?
I love it. Yes. We talked last week about Brandon Clark being an amazing transfer for the Zags. Obviously, Mustafa Haran has been amazing for St. John's. What's more amazing, can you imagine if he had stayed at Auburn? They might be like a top 2 team or something in the nation. What I can't believe is that this team is 9-0 because they've been pulling out these losses by the skin of their necks or something. What would be amazing is if they get through the 3 cupcakes, they'll be 12-0, which they should. If they can somehow win at Seton Hall, which is possible, and then somehow beat Marquette at home, can you imagine a 14-0 St. John's team coming to D.C. to face the Hoyas on January 5th?
Well, I think you better be there, right?
I better.
All right.
Yeah, and not to crap all over St. John's, because while I don't think they're as good as their record, I don't want to overstate or understate. I don't want to understate just the job that Chris Mullins has done since he took over. They were a tire fire when he got there. He's a first-time head coach at any level. And for him to get them turned around the way that he has is phenomenal. So I definitely like the direction the program is going, and I want to compliment them on that. It's just that I don't think they're quite as good as their 9-0 record, and I don't think they're going to win the conference.
Right. David, what about Marquette? The nice win over Wisconsin. They also beat UTEP this week. Struggled a little bit in that game, I think, but they got the win.
Yeah.
Uh,
The Wisconsin game, although it is at home and it's not as if they went to Madison and won, I think that it was still a huge win, maybe for mental health and momentum as much as it was for anything else. It was an emotional game, and they beat a highly ranked team at home. And I think that could really get their motors started. But what a game that was. And that followed up a week ago, a big win against Kansas State at home, although really how good is Kansas State?
Well, Titel, how about talking a little bit about Villanova? And I've got the upcoming schedule here because they've got a pretty interesting game. Probably the most interesting game of the night coming up tomorrow night, don't they?
Trap. It's a trap game. This is a team, the defending champs. They had their early season problems with the back-to-back losses to Michigan and Furman, which obviously are looking like fantastic losses right now. And they pummeled Oklahoma State, Florida State, Temple, getting all their quality wins taken care of. If you think this team is not looking forward to Kansas at Kansas on Saturday, the fog, Azubuike hurts, I know it's Big Five, I know it's Palestra, so I don't think they're going to overlook my Quakers, but you never know.
Well, you know what? They played the Palestra once already this year against LaSalle, and they completely failed to show up for that game. I don't know how they even won it against a winless LaSalle team. So, hey, I think it's a lot better team than LaSalle, your Quakers. I'll give them that much.
And we've got the Paul going for the Chicago City Championship this week.
They could be in trouble with Chicago State, but David, how about the Cincinnati Xavier game? And very nice win by Cincinnati.
Yeah, well, it really was. It was at home. This is a series that Xavier had dominated for about 20 years now. There was a time, I think, about 15, 20 years ago where Cincinnati was clearly the alpha program. They were nationally relevant, whereas Xavier was sort of regionally good. But Xavier still dominated the series. Recently, Xavier had outperformed Cincinnati, arguably, in the rankings in the NCAA tournament on the national stage, and they continued to dominate the series. So this one had to feel really good, and they just basically blew their doors off. Xavier could not get anything going. It was a tremendous defensive performance by Cincinnati, and another ugly, boring game. This rivalry hasn't really produced any exciting games in a while, and no off-the-court shenanigans either. So.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of surprised Cincinnati not in the rankings, but another team for this conference is Titel. Do we have to pay attention to this undefeated Houston team?
Yes, but what you need to pay attention to in the middle there is the Tier 3 where there's nothing.
Right.
I don't know how they did the whole schedule this year, but as you can see, like, they're undefeated, so they get credit for that. But they've played good teams and horrible teams and nothing in the middle. So you gotta give at some point, like, I'm waiting for NJT to finally appear on their schedule. But you're thinking about a team that made the tournament, great team last year. They lost their best player, Rob Gray, he graduated. But they're 8-0. They got these good wins up top. Their next 7 games are all at home. It's like they don't have to leave their dorm rooms for a month. Dare we dream. We go to March 10th, and Houston's 30-0, and they go to Cincinnati where the Bearcats ruin the streak. Dare to dream.
They got to get through this LSU game. I think, even though it's a home game, that's the one you got to circle to get. I think that might be the one they got to win to get there even.
Another team that's been playing well, at least most of the time, is Temple. So going there might be kind of rough.
Yeah, going to Temple, yeah. Temple's lost to Villanova this past week, but upcoming schedule here in the American should be flashing up on the screen. We already mentioned a few of these games. An old A-10, classic A-10 rival with UMass Temple also on Wednesday. That was a fun one for years.
Yeah, this one probably won't be.
Let's go ahead. What else we got to discuss here? How about a little Mountain West hoops? That's a little better than anything else we got left here.
Yeah. Well, we got to do it though, Chev. We got to talk.
We'll eventually got to go somewhere else. But why don't we start in the Mountain West though? And Titel, I know you want to talk a little Nevada, don't you?
I want to talk anybody who beats ASU. You know me.
Okay.
This 10-0 team, it's not like they're doing home court heroes. They've played each of their last 6 games away from home, and they've won all 6 of them. If you look at Ken Palm, you talk about the 30-0 dream. They're favored to win every single game left on their schedule. Wait for it, by at least 7 points.
Yeah.
I really think that I don't think they're going to go undefeated, but it is a serious conversation that we need to have. If you like good players on non-power conference teams, this Saturday is for you. I'll wait till we turn the page for that one, though.
I think that they certainly are good enough to run the table in the regular season. They've got a couple of really tough ones. Going to Utah State, for instance, toward the end of the year. I know Utah State did not look good against BYU, but they've looked good more than they've looked bad this year. I'm kind of big on them as well if we're going to talk about a second team in this conference. But this is a very, very good Nevada team. And there have been times where they've played decent teams or good teams, not played their best basketball and still won. And that is like when a team doesn't play up to their ceiling and still wins, then that's a sign that their ceiling is pretty high. It wouldn't shock me at all because they are going to be favored in every single game that is left on their schedule. And they may not win them all, but they'll be favored in them all. And then if you look a little bit beyond that, the next time that they are not favored might be the Elite Eight if they get that far.
You could be right. I mean, they got some tough tests there at Vegas, at San Diego State, but those are not those are not great teams by any means. Those are San Diego State very disappointing, I thought, so far this year.
Yeah.
But Tytel, you want to look at the upcoming schedule here. We do have a really interesting game for them coming up this weekend, though, don't we?
If you like great players on teams outside the power conference, as I was saying, Saturday is for you. South Dakota State, Mike Daum. He could lead the nation in scoring if Chris Clemens ever comes down. He's averaging, I think, like 25 a game. Big man, he can shoot threes. He makes his free throws. He could get drafted in June. And then we have Nevada with the Martin twins and Jordan Caroline and everybody else. But Caleb Martin against Mike Daum, that could be two All-Americans facing off in a non-conference December game. Enjoy, America.
Yes.
But David, that's probably only the second biggest game in the Mountain West this week because, of course, coming up tomorrow night, we have
got the Front Range. We've got Denver at Wyoming. We love the Front Range.
One last conference we do have to discuss. It's a requirement. I don't know why we do it, but Atlantic 10. When you're talking that two of the top four teams are Fordham and Duquesne in the standings, do we need to really discuss this conference very long?
Well, let's start off with Fordham because it's just so fascinating. Let's pull them up there, Chad.
Sure. Talk about the main loss.
Yeah, among other things. Fordham is as you could see there, they're 7-2. Now, for Fordham to be 7-2, that's almost unbelievably remarkable. Is that still okay?
No,
there we go.
Okay, there it goes.
Right, and I realized that 6 of those wins were quad 4 wins, but still, Fordham, typically a poor quad 4 team themselves, that's still kind of a turnaround. And they did have the home win against Rutgers, who, is kind of improved. What did you?
Sorry, it should be coming back.
Okay, we got an issue. Okay. But look at the games that they lost. The only thing that is keeping us from talking about Fordham as being one of the better stories in college basketball, whether they have the staying power or not, from being 9-0, is Houston Baptist and Maine. I don't know what to make of it. So is this a good story? Are they going in the right direction? Are they finally trending up, or is it just more Fordham being Fordham?
Well, again, they lost Houston Baptist. They lost to Maine. They beat Columbia by 1 point. They beat Manhattan on the road by 1 point. A Manhattan team that lost by about 50 points to Hofstra at home tonight. Yeah. This is not a good Fordham team, David.
Right. No. So even when they're doing well, like even when we want to be cool, nice to Fordham, we can't be. How bad is that?
But Tytel, if there is one team, I guess, to discuss, I think it's the one on the right there, the Billikens, who did pick up the win over Butler and the win over Oregon State this past week.
Don't forget VCU.
And they already beat Seton Hall on the road. Is there something here with this team?
Could be. I think that the 6-0 home court record screams home court hero. Obviously, a 5-point loss at a decent Southern Illinois team is nothing to lose sleep about, nor the 2-point loss at a usually horrendous Pitt team. We're going to see very quickly, though, talk about a tough non-conference schedule. Houston and Florida State back-to-back. Good luck.
Yeah, and another team that's actually, making a case for itself, and there's only 2 that really are, is this VCU team that went to Texas, got the win. They got a really, bad loss. You're kind of holding your nose with that Old Dominion loss. But outside of that, VCU is at least pulling their weight.
They played well at Virginia on Sunday.
They really did, and they led for a good portion of that game. And I had kind of been dogging VCU as being, just having an inflated record without really doing anything impressive. But one of the more impressive showings, at least for me, was one of the games they didn't win, and that was the Virginia game. And if they play like that the rest of the way, they should be able to dominate the conference. And when you look at some of these records, they're not – the A-10 smells pretty bad, but, you have some teams in here with bloated records. The problem is they've come against weak schedules, and just the sheer number of home bye games that this conference has lost has sunk it. But there's two teams making a case for themselves, and it's only two. It's St. Louis and VCU. Dayton has looked good at times. They also looked good against Virginia, but couldn't get it done. And there just isn't anything there for Dayton. But
Davidson, anyone? Davidson? No.
Well, yeah. Well, let's look at Davidson at 8-1. It's a pretty empty resume, but they are 8-1.
Wait till we turn the page. I'll tell you about Davidson.
Okay.
Well, I'll put Davidson. You want Davidson's profile here? There they are. Their one loss was to Purdue, but tier 3, tier 4, tier 3, tier 4.
Yeah.
They're playing an ACC team on Monday on the road. Wait for it, and they're favored. I know it's Wake, but they're favored at an ACC team.
I don't think they're favored against that other ACC team on the 29th. That way. But let's take a look at their upcoming schedule here, and we've got a pretty interesting game, Titel, coming up on Saturday right here. I think it's actually the following week. It's not this week; it's the following week, though, in Atlantic City as well. But do you want to talk a little bit about the bottom of the Atlantic 10?
So when you get to the bottom of the Atlantic 10, you say hello to GW, and you keep going, and you go all the way to LaSalle. 0-10, their leading scorer, Pookie Powell, great name, is out with a lower body injury, so it might not be getting better anytime soon. Their next scheduled game against an Alabama A&M team who could also be 0-10 when they play in the great city of Atlantic City.
I'm doing what I can to get to that game. I couldn't make the other event we have here, but an exciting 4-team event with LaSalle, Alabama,
A&M. If they left the doors unlocked with no security at all, you still would have no trouble getting a seat.
Let's take a look at two other teams here. I'm just going to pull instead of the standings, I'm going to pull their profiles up, and they're both in the top 25. David, we'll start on the left here with the Buffalo Bulls, who continue to remain undefeated and have coming up this week, I guess we've got Southern Illinois and at Syracuse. A real interesting week for Buffalo.
Yeah, it's big. I like the Southern
Syracuse
Illinois
game is actually next week, next Tuesday, but Southern Illinois this week.
Second game of a home and home. Those two scheduling each other out of conference home and home, kind of rare. But yeah, going to Syracuse and to Marquette. I don't think they need to win one of those, but if they lose both of those, Syracuse and Marquette, they kind of need to blow through everything else. But with wins against San Francisco, at Southern Illinois, and at West Virginia, as long as they avoid stubbing their toes and can hold serve, I think that they're going to land inside the bubble. But they're certainly good enough, I think, to win one of those games. If not, I'd be shocked if they won them both, but I wouldn't be shocked if they won one of them. This is a pretty good Buffalo team.
Yeah, and on the right side there, still ranked in one of the two polls, not both of them, the Furman Paladins, who moved up 2 spots despite on the strength of a huge win over USC Upstate this week, Titel. Are you buying Furman yet?
For beating one of the worst 50 or so teams in the nation? No, I'm not. Couple of cupcakes. They go to LSU on December 21st. If the student body is already home for Christmas, then maybe it's an empty arena. Who knows what can happen? Of the two, I believe more in Buffalo, to the point that if you have to pick a team to go undefeated in conference play this year, I know that you don't just walk into Toledo or Kent State and stuff, but UNC Greensboro and Wofford, I really think Buffalo has a good chance of going undefeated in conference play.
I'll tell you what, I'll put it this way. The next 2 games for Buffalo are Southern Illinois at home and at Syracuse. The next 2 games for Furman, Charleston Southern, and UNC Wilmington at home. I think Buffalo's got a better chance, Dave, to go 2-0 than Furman does.
Yeah, well, Furman, they're a great story. What they've done is impressive. They've won all their games, but Villanova currently is the only team with a winning record against Div 1 competition, and they have had to sweat out some games against awful teams. Like, Western Carolina only beat them by 2, needed double overtime to do it. They went to, they blasted Bob Jones, but the other game, Gardner-Webb at home, I think that was an overtime game. If it wasn't, it was very close.
Yeah,
So,
they've struggled against bad teams, and I'm not there with them. But no, it's a great story as it goes on, and it's great to see them there. And
I love it. I mean, I love that they're in the rankings. I think it's good for the SoCon. I think it's good for basketball. But if you're asking me if I think they're going to be there at the end, I don't think they will be.
I guess on that note, let me go ahead and pull this down here, and let's run through both of you. Any other final thoughts or any other things you want to discuss for the evening? And Titel, let me start with you.
I'm looking forward as much as obviously to the Villanova-Penn game on Tuesday night, but more so to Saturday. We just had a great Saturday a couple days ago with the Marquette-Wisconsin overtime game, the Seton-Kentucky overtime game, and now that college football is kind of off the schedule until the bowl season heats up in a few weeks, we really get these amazing Saturday college basketball games. You get the Crossroads Classic, obviously, but the 2 games featuring 4 Hall of Fame coaches, Gonzaga at Carolina, Coach Few against Roy Williams, and Villanova and Kansas, Coach Wright against Bill Self. If you love the sport, this is going to be a fantastic Saturday.
It really is. We have these dead weeks, especially this week, even more so the next week, but with the finals, but great weekends coming up. David.
Sort of a point or a thought and possibly a discussion point. When realignment was happening, I was really moping really badly about what it was doing to a lot of traditional and regional rivalries across the sport. And I remember thinking, well, some of these rivalries are ending, and even if we get them in out-of-conference play, it's not going to be the same. Well, a lot of them have started to come back as out-of-conference games. This Saturday, for instance, we had BYU-Utah, used to be a conference game. West Virginia-Pitt, used to be a conference game. Georgetown-Syracuse, used to be a conference game. And those games, while they may not mean as much on paper, when you watch them, even though it's December, those games felt pretty much the way that they used to, with the same intensity level, and that mixed in with some of the other wins. And those are just 3 that came to mind. But we're starting to see not all of them are back. We still need Texas A&M back. We still certainly need Kansas, Missouri back. But it raised an interesting question. And actually, David Warlock, when we discussed this with him, kind of pointed this out. Is this putting a brighter spotlight on the game in December? And if so, is that good for the sport to have a brighter spotlight early prior to conference play starting? I just kind of wondered what you all thought of that, because how much fun was Saturday? And Titel mentioned the Saturday we have coming up. We had an amazing Saturday this past Saturday.
I think it's a good point. I mean, Titel, do you agree with that? That do you think it's good for the game that we're seeing so many more big rivalries at this time of year?
It's not bad for the sport. I think it's a good thing. Like, I remember even just as of a couple of years ago, everybody was questioning whether Gonzaga was a number 1 seed caliber team because, when you beat up on St. Mary's and Pepperdine, Pacific and Portland and stuff, we don't know how good you are. But the whole point is nobody wanted to schedule them because they were so good. Kudos to Roy Williams for saying, you guys, if you're willing to come 3,000 miles, we'd love to have you on Tobacco Road. I don't know if they're going to win. It's a hard place to play, and Killian Tilly's still hurt and all that stuff. But to see Gonzaga play like a national perennial power is exciting.
I'll tell you that there's been more games, I think, this year between top 5, top 10 teams than I remember in a long time. It's just it looks like every week we're having matches between 2 teams that I woke into the season saying these are Final Four caliber teams, and we've got it again this weekend, David.
Right, and if you go back to the old Hoops HD archives, and if you don't want to shift through them, just email John Stalika. He's got them all on file.
Because of my memory.
Remember 4 or 5 years, like when we first started doing this, we would had several weeks where we would discuss how disappointing it was that the season got off to such a slow start, and you would have teams playing in half-empty arenas, and these were good teams. This year, I noticed it. I started to notice it a year or 2 ago, but it's definitely evident this year. Basketball was a big deal immediately. week one, full arenas, big games, and then you had the excitement of the exempt tournaments. And this past week, it felt like February or March. Like the number of games that were sold out, the number of games that felt intense, even though it was only December. And maybe while I still selfishly kind of wish these were still conference rivalry games, it was great to see that level of enthusiasm at this point in the year. And you know who really liked it, Chad? Did you see this?
No, I didn't see this.
Okay, this guy right here loved it. Strength and conditioning coach from George Mason, Andy Hindurahan.
I really think that is the point where we need to end this show because I just can't handle this anymore. On that note, on behalf of John Titel, David Griggs, I don't know if we'll even be back again. I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with Under the Radar Wednesday night and another Hoops HD report next week.